Hello and welcome to this beginner's guide to Imperator Rome 2.0. This guide is for beginners and is intended to be something that you can watch if you have not played Imperator before or are returning to it after a long time away, and as such is going to be primarily focused on getting you up and running, playing and having fun, rather than digging deep into the crunchy numbers to find out which strategies are the absolute meta and all that. For one, that's not how I personally find fun in playing the game, and two, I don't think it's right for beginners. Also, it's worth mentioning that this guide is being made with patch 2.0.1, and with the rapid pace of development on this game, if you're watching in the far future, some things may be different. This guide will be split up into three main sections, the first being an overview of the various systems within the game without going too in-depth into what all of your options are. The second section will be those deep dives. Again, not in a meta strategy way, but more of an in-depth look at what each system has to offer and your options when interacting with it. The final section will be a guided walkthrough, where I do a short Let's Play style run through of the game at a slower pace and explaining every decision I make to the best of my ability. So with all that said, let's dive right in. So we're going to be starting off our guide right here in the nation selection screen. We can choose any nation on the map to play as, and clicking on them gives a little bit of information about them, such as their government type, their culture and religion, how populous they are, and who is in control. We can also see their heritage, which is a set of modifiers that each nation gets, consisting of 2 positives and 1 negative. Selecting Rome here, for example, shows that their heritage increases the speed at which they integrate foreign cultures, increases the size of their levies, but as a trade-off, their navies have a malus to their morale. Some heritages are stronger than others, so it can be worth looking around to see which heritage suits your playstyle before settling on a nation to play as. For this guide though, we're going to be settling on Rome, as it is their name on the box. It's a relatively easy nation to play as, and, I imagine, quite popular too. Now, on the top of the screen we see a bar of resources that we need to pay attention to, with the first being our treasury, in which we see that we start off with 200 gold and an income of 1.02 gold per month. Gold is used for a multitude of things like constructing buildings, paying for maintenance of troops, fleets and forts, and paying your character's wages, and is generated in 2 main ways, through taxing your population and through trade. We'll get to both of these things in time, but first let's move on to the next number over, your manpower. Just like with your gold, you see both your current amount of manpower and how much manpower you're gaining per month. Unlike gold, however, your manpower has a cap which it cannot go over. The cap and the rate at which you reach the cap is based on the amount of citizens, freemen and tribesmen in your nation and on how happy they are. You also gain some manpower from certain vassal types like feudatories, which as Rome you have 4 of. Manpower is used to replenish your armies if they take casualties in war, and also how one recruits new units to their legions once you gain access to them. As you can imagine, if you run out of manpower, you will find prosecuting wars to be a much tougher task, so you'll want to keep a good surplus of manpower for times of need. This is the second resource in a row which is generated by your population, so it is a good as time as any to jump in and talk about pops. There are 5 pop types in the game, representing the various strata of civilization. There are nobles, citizens, freemen, tribesmen, and slaves. Nobles are generally what you will have the fewest of, and will be very hard to keep happy. They generate research points, used to advance your technology and your trade routes. Citizens are much more common and provide research points, though a lot fewer than the nobles per pop, manpower, and trade routes. Freemen generate manpower at around double the rate per pop than citizens, and also generate tax revenue. Tribesmen generate the same as freemen, though at a very much reduced rate. As a civilized democracy, you'll not be having too many of these pops. And finally, slaves generate tax revenue, and if you have enough of them in a territory, a surplus trade good. Each of these pops, other than the slaves, will generate more of the resource they control if you make them happy, and this can be done in a couple of different ways. First, we have the aforementioned trade goods. Every single good you can trade or produce has a modifier associated with it, and many of these are bonuses to the happiness of your pops. For example, here we have precious metals, which will provide, if you produce or trade it into your province, a plus 4% bonus to the citizen's happiness. If traded in 2 lots of it, the happiness would raise by 8%, and so on and so forth. As we are looking at the capital province, we can see that if we import 2 units of precious metals, we would also get the surplus in capital bonus, which is a further 8% bonus to the happiness of our citizens. Not every trade good gives happiness though, with bonuses ranging from things like iron increasing tax percentage, with the surplus giving you a bonus to the discipline of your heavy infantry, to salt increasing the amount of food you grow in the province, and with the surplus being a reduction in the maintenance of your legions. Each trade good also has a price associated with it, and this is the amount of money you make from opening up a trade route for this good. the aforementioned precious metals being one of the best trade goods in the game, giving you half a gold every month per unit traded. Trade is a fantastic way of making money, and in fact generally ends up making up the bulk of your income, so it's well worth setting up these trade routes. It can get very micro-intensive, especially when you have a large nation, so you also have the ability to automate this process and allow the game to generate these trade routes for you. I would recommend doing this in every province except the capital, as you really want to pay attention to those capital surplus bonuses, as some can be incredibly desirable. Now, I did hold off on making this guide for some time after 2.0 was released, primarily because this trade screen is for all intents and purposes a work in progress. On the game director's Twitter, this image has been teased, which promises to make trade a lot easier to navigate, with each of those numbers showing how much a trade good you will be able to import. This will vastly speed up the process of importing goods. Now, the other way of making your pops happy is through buildings. In a city, you have 16 possible buildings you can construct, with a wide variety of different effects from increasing the food capacity of the province to providing defense in times of war. As we're focusing right now on happiness, we should take a look at these 4 buildings on the bottom right: the Academy, the Court of Law, the Forum, and the Mill. You can, as a maximum, only have 3 of each of these buildings in any given city, and they will increase the happiness of their respective pop type, along with improving the overall civilization value of your city, and increasing the amount of pop type the city will attempt to reach through promotion and demotion. The civilization value is another very important factor in a territory, and is another determinator of pop happiness, as well as having a flat 1-to-1 bonus to your pop's resource output. Needless to say, any way of increasing the civilization value of your lands is desirable as a civilized nation. Now, you will also notice that tribesmen do not have any associated building to construct in a city, and that is because they generally do not like being in them. Just as civilization value has a positive bonus to the happiness of your nobles, citizens, and freemen, it has a negative modifier to the happiness of your tribesmen. Tribesmen prefer to live in settlements, which is another type of territory entirely, so let's have a chat about those. Unlike cities, settlements can only have 1 building constructed in them, and there are only 8 options. The happiness of your civilized population is negatively impacted by living in an unimproved settlement, and will generally try to migrate out into the cities if there is no building constructed there. But while your pops don't like them, settlements can definitely have their uses. For starters, settlements are the only territory type that can produce food, as no cities can have any food trade goods. In fact, if you were to found a new city on a territory with grain, then as soon as the city is constructed, it will generate a new random trade good instead. As settlements are the only territories that can produce food, it's definitely worth boosting the amount that they can generate, and this can be done with a farm estate building, which boosts both the amount of food grown and reduces the amount of slaves needed in the territory to provide a surplus of the trade good. The mine is another building that will reduce the amount of slaves needed for a surplus, and can only be constructed on land that has a mineable trade good, like iron, marble, or precious metals. Another very interesting building that one can construct in the settlement is the barracks, which raises the desired amount of freemen in the settlement and will cause, over time, tribesmen and slaves to promote to freemen. Later on in the game, one can unlock an invention to increase the amount of buildings you can construct in a settlement from 1 to 2, which does sound like a small bonus, but the impact is huge. However, we do not have time to talk about technology in this video, so please join me next time for this beginner's guide to Imperator Rome, where we'll go over technology, inventions, and more. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.